Though what happened in Chile was devastating, I really thought the choice to rage against what happened would be the end of it. I thought I had found my power and had bravely overcome the obstacle. I wish I could tell you that I rose anew, coming back stronger than ever, but life is rarely that simple. The hole that loss punches in your heart isn't erased with anger, with power, or even with inspiration. Over the next 2 years, the fury and powerlessness I felt died into a persistent background sadness, which then died into an overwhelming malaise and numbness. I was checked out. I think the thing that makes grief so unbearable is that we don't have a roadmap for it. There's no set endpoint. It seems completely beyond our control, fading away only to re-emerge sometimes years later, just as fresh as it was the moment the loss occurred. I had never had issues with addiction throughout my life. It was one of the areas I was extremely thankful to have never even remotely had to worry about. But after Chile, there was a hole, and it was feeding into and re-emphasizing other painful holes in my heart that I thought I had forgotten about. All the people I had lost, the trauma I had endured throughout my life, the parts of myself I had watched fade. It wasn't just the theft. It was like all of the ungrieved things in my life took the opportunity to rise up all at once in solidarity, forming this giant pit in the middle of my being. I kept trying to move on, to work it away, to grow past it, but no matter what I did, it remained. I didn't know what to do. My depressive cycles were getting so bad again that I couldn't even function, and there was only one thing that solved it: getting fucked up. Escaping into chemically induced altered states powerful enough that I couldn't feel my wounds, couldn't even remember normal reality. It was such a welcome escape. I haven't dealt with very many suicidal thoughts in the past, which has always been strange to me given my history of depression. But during that period in the depths of addiction, I finally understood what it's like to wish you didn't exist, to crave nothingness. When your daily life feels like an endless cycle of hurt and confusion, simply disappearing feels like the merciful kiss of God. So I disappeared. More and more of my life was sacrificed to the gracious void, and less of myself remained. Every time I came back to reality, it was hellish. Everything in my life was fading, and all I could do was lock myself in my room and try to forget about it. More and more friendships, professional opportunities, and experiences were slipping out of my grasp as I threw up my hands and just gave up on it all. I felt like I had finally come face to face with the meaninglessness of it all, the reality of the pain of existence, and had decided to take my exit. I was ready to fuck myself up until I died. And I was on my way there for almost 2 years. Near the end, it felt like the only life I had ever known. But then, in the midst of the despair and void, against all odds, some part of me was still crying out, desperately, that it didn't want to disappear. It longed to feel things again, to taste the world in some way. I ended up going to Portland for a month to stay with one of my good friends, Tal, from the group Echoes. His roommate, Xander, was brilliant, and over the first few weeks, he introduced me to a concept that would end up changing my life: shadow work. One of the core principles of shadow work is that the negative characteristics in ourselves aren't evil. They have positive goals, but the way they're going about them is maladaptive. Shadow work is the practice of looking at the parts of you that you hate, the ones that are most despicable to your sensibilities, and holding them, having compassion upon them, and transmuting them to their most beautiful and bloomed forms. I realized that the part of me that wanted to escape into the void wasn't evil. It was, in fact, the deepest wisdom that my soul had to offer. It was simply being misdirected. At its heart, it was creative destruction, the desire to raze the diseased forest to make way for new growth. but I was engaging with that destruction in the least creative and least life-giving way possible. I was taking the cowardly way out, eradicating myself without the hard work that accompanies doing it the hard way. Through shadow work, I realized that the eradication of self didn't have to be a death sentence. It was a pursuit that could be undertaken in a way that leads to redemption, engaging with yourself in ruthless honesty and ridding yourself of the mental structures that have been leading you to ruin. The only thing it required was for me to, for the first time in my life, take a full and honest look at who I was, which terrified me. A bit later, I met Ronit and ended up moving to Bali with her to get away from it all. I engaged in shadow work regularly there, transmuting my hate for myself into productive energy. I started writing from that place of ruthlessness, and Exuvium came out. There was a sort of surreal brutality to the work. The same obsession with the void was there like it had been in Widow, but it had a completely different tone to it. It wasn't helplessly caught in the madness. It was thriving in it. There was a power there, the willingness to face the darkness head-on, to embody it. Like most real-life stories, this wasn't a clean progression. I fell in and out of despair, had moments of triumph where I thought everything had gotten better, followed by moments of falling right back into the things I was trying to escape. Beautiful experiences of joy, followed by periods of immense pain, both to myself and to Ronit, who was sitting there helpless as I went back to wrecking my life. Eventually, I moved back to the US and decided once and for all that I needed to go all out with positive destruction. I couldn't afford to half-ass it anymore. My life was literally on the line. I left LA, my home for almost 10 years where all of my friends lived, the place I felt safe. I checked myself into a rehab and spent months dissecting myself, my motives, my character, my morality. After that, I just disappeared for a while. I took a year-long sabbatical, traveling around the wilderness of the US, camping alone, introspecting, reintroducing myself to the truest parts of me that I had become so divorced from. The destruction hurt so much and was terrifying, but at the end, for the first time in my life, I felt complete, happy even. I caught myself genuinely smiling, and it caught me off guard. I had forgotten I could feel like that. I took pictures of it because it felt so special and rare. I moved to the forest to be alone in a place where my soul could finally thrive. I finished Exuvium, and somewhere along the way I realized that I had finally moved past the oblivion I had been caught in for so long. It had felt like it was going to last an eternity, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and there is peace. But the peace was so much deeper than any I had experienced before, because it was predicated on an understanding that beautiful things are at their most potent only when juxtaposed with their opposites. Courage in the face of terror, vulnerability in the face of imminent pain, meaning in the face of meaninglessness. I had stopped running and instead had faced the void, had known the void intimately, had barreled headfirst into its chaos and its nihilism, and in its depths I had found a key. Ringing out like a lullaby through an apocalyptic wasteland, all the more beautiful for the death and destruction that surrounded it, I found a part of me that didn't care whether the world meant anything or not. It longed to run, to sing, to rage, to suck the marrow out of the world. Staring at the inevitable tragedy of existence, furious and dripping with blood, it was screaming against all logic that it wanted to live.